What are the six retributions? Ananda, living beings create karma with their six consciousnesses. The evil retributions they call down upon themselves come from the six sense organs. What are the evil retributions that arise from the six sense organs? The first is the retribution of sin, which beckons one and leads one to evil ends. The karma of sin intermingles, so that at the time of death one first sees a raging conflagration which fills the 10 directions. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness takes flight but then falls. Riding on a wisp of smoke, it enters the unintermittent hell. There, it is aware of two appearances. One is a perception of brightness, in which can be seen all sorts of evil things, and it gives rise to boundless fear. The other is a perception of darkness, in which there is total stillness and no sight, and it experiences boundless terror. When the fire that comes from seeing burns the sense of hearing, it becomes cauldrons of boiling water and molten copper. When it burns the breath, it becomes black smoke and purple fumes. When it burns the sense of taste, it becomes scorching hot pellets and molten iron gruel. When it burns the sense of touch, it becomes white-hot embers and glowing coals. When it burns the mind, it becomes stars of fire that shower everywhere and whip up and inflame the entire realm of space. The second is the retribution of hearing, which beckons one and leads one to evil ends. The karma of hearing intermingles, and thus at the time of death, one first sees gigantic waves that drown heaven and earth. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness falls into the water and rides the current into the intermittent hell. There it is aware of two sensations. One is open hearing, in which it hears all sorts of noise, and its essential spirit becomes confused. The other is closed hearing, in which there is total stillness and no hearing, and its soul sinks into oblivion. When the waves from hearing flow into the hearing, they become scolding and interrogation. When they flow into the seeing, they become thunder and roaring and evil poisonous vapors. When they flow into the breath, they become rain and fog that is permeated with poisonous organisms that entirely fill up the body. When they flow into the sense of taste, they become pus and blood and every kind of filth. When they flow into the sense of touch, they become animals and ghosts and excrement and urine. When they flow into the mind, they become lightning and hail, which ravage the heart and soul. The third is the retribution of smelling, which beckons one and leads one to evil ends. The karma of smelling intermingles, and thus at the time of death, one first sees a poisonous smoke that permeates the atmosphere near and far. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness wells up out of the earth and enters the intermittent hell. There it is aware of two sensations. One is unobstructed smelling, in which it is thoroughly infused with the evil vapors and its mind becomes distressed. The other is obstructed smelling, in which its breath is cut off and there is no passage, and it lies stifled and suffocating on the ground. When the vapor of smelling invades the breath, it becomes cross-examination and bearing witness. When it invades the seeing, it becomes fire and torches. When it invades the hearing, it becomes sinking and drowning oceans and bubbling cauldrons. When it invades the sense of taste, it becomes putrid or rancid foods. When it invades the sense of touch, it becomes ripping apart and beating to a pulp It also becomes a huge mountain of flesh which has 100,000 eyes and which is sucked and fed upon by numberless worms. When it invades the mind, it becomes ashes, pestilent airs, and flying sand and gravel which cut the body to ribbons. The fourth is the retribution of tasting, which beckons one and leads one to evil ends. This karma of tasting intermingles, and thus at the time of death one first sees an iron net ablaze with a raging fire that covers over the entire world. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness passes down through this hanging net, and suspended upside down, it enters the unintermittent hell. There it is aware of two sensations. One is a sucking air, which congeals into ice so that it freezes the flesh of his body. The other is a spitting blast of air, which spews out a raging fire that roasts his bones and marrow to a pulp. When the tasting of flavors passes through the sense of taste, it becomes what must be acknowledged and what must be endured. When it passes through the seeing, it becomes burning metal and stones. When it passes through the hearing, it becomes sharp weapons and knives. When it passes through the sense of smell, it becomes a vast iron cage that encloses the entire land. When it passes through the sense of touch, it becomes bows and arrows, crossbows and darts. When it passes through the mind, it becomes flying pieces of molten iron that rain down from out of space. The fifth is the retribution of touching, which beckons one and leads one to evil ends. The karma of touching intermingles, and thus, at the time of death, one first sees huge mountains closing in on one from four sides, leaving no path of escape. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness then sees a vast iron city, fiery snakes and fiery dogs, wolves, lions, ox-headed jail keepers, and horse-headed rakshasas brandishing spears and lances drive it into the iron city toward the unintermittent hell. There, it is aware of two sensations. One is touch that involves coming together, in which mountains come together to squeeze its body until its flesh, bones, and blood are totally dispersed. The other is touch that involves separation, in which knives and swords attack the body, ripping the heart and liver to shreds. When this touching passes through the sensation of touch, it becomes striking, biting, stabbing, and piercing. When it passes through the seeing, it becomes burning and scorching. When it passes through the hearing, it becomes questioning, investigating, court examinations, and interrogation. When it passes through the sense of smell, it becomes enclosures, bags, beating, and biting up. When it passes through the sense of taste, it becomes blowing, pinching, chopping, and severing. When it passes through the mind, it becomes falling, flying, frying, and broiling. The sixth is the retribution of thinking, which beckons one and leads one to evil ends. The karma of thinking intermingles, and thus, at the time of death, one first sees a foul wind which devastates the land. The deceased one's spiritual consciousness is blown up into space, and then, spiraling downward, it rides that wind straight into the unintermittent hell. There, it is aware of two sensations. One is extreme confusion, which causes it to be frantic and to race about ceaselessly. The other is not confusion, but rather an acute awareness which causes it to suffer from endless roasting and burning, the extreme pain of which is difficult to bear. When this deviant thought combines with thinking, it becomes locations and places. When it combines with seeing, it becomes inspection and testimonies. When it combines with hearing, it becomes huge crushing robes, ice and frost, dirt and fog, and when it combines with the smelling, it becomes a great fiery car, a fiery boat, and a fiery gel. When it combines with tasting, it becomes loud calling, wailing, and regretful crying. When it combines with touch, it becomes sensations of large and small, where 10,000 births and 10,000 deaths are endowed every day, and of lying with one's face to the ground. Ananda, these are called the 10 causes and 6 retributions of the hells, which are all created by the confusion and falseness of living beings. If living beings create this evil karma simultaneously, they enter the Avashi hell and endure limitless suffering, passing through limitless compass. If each of the 6 sense organs creates them, and if what is done includes each state and each sense organ, then the person will enter the 8 unintermittent hells. If the 3 karmas of body, mouth, and mind commit acts of killing, stealing, and lust, the person will enter the 18 hells. If the 3 karmas are not all involved, and there is perhaps just one act of killing and or of stealing, then the person must enter the 36 hells. If the sense organ of sight alone commits just one karmic offense, then the person must enter the 108 hells. Because of these, living beings who do certain things create certain karma, and so in the world they enter collective hells, which arise from false thinking and which originally are not there at all. And then Ananda, after the living beings who have slandered and destroyed rules and deportment, violated the Bodhisattva precepts, slandered the Buddha's nirvana, and created various other kinds of karma, passed through many karmas of being burned in the inferno. They finally finish paying for their offenses and are reborn as ghosts. If greed for material objects was the original cause that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters material objects, and he is called a strange ghost. If it was greed for lust that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters the wind, and he is called a drought ghost. If it was greed to lie that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters an animal, and he is called a main ghost. If it was greed for hatred that make the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters worms, and he is called a cool poison ghost. If it was greed for animosity that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters degeneration, and he is called a pestilence ghost. If it was greed to be arrogant that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters gazes, and he is called a hungry ghost. If it was greed to be unjust to others that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters darkness, and he is called a paralysis ghost. If it was greed for views that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters essential energy, and he is called a Wan Liang ghost. If it was greed for deception that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters brightness, and he is called a servant ghost. If it was greed to be litigious that made the person commit offenses, then after he has finished paying for his crimes, he takes shape when he encounters pupil, and he is called a messenger ghost. Ananda, such a person's fall is due to his totally emotional level of functioning. When his karmic fire has burned out, he will rise up to be reborn as a ghost. This is occasioned by his own karma of false thinking. If he awakens to Bodhi, then in the wonderful perfect brightness there isn't anything at all.